Yo, what's going on, y'all? It's Combo Breaker 99. I'm back on the fight front once again. Make sure y'all subscribe. Just back with this real quick discussion video here on just some comments Amir made in a new interview about who he felt like the #1 welterweight was and who would win between Spence and Crawford. Well, all roads lead to Bud for him. Just to be straight up. Amir Khan said that he felt like the best welterweight was Terence Crawford. He feels like he has the better skill set. The fact that him being a switch hitter makes him really dangerous. He has a high IQ. He's a very accurate power puncher, and that's why he gives him the edge over Errol Spence. He feels like his switch hitting would give Errol Spence some problems, and he feels like he's just an all-around better puncher. Well, I do agree with something else Amir Khan said as far as Terence Crawford being one of the best pound-for-pound fighters. I agree with that. But when you start to get technical and you say the #1 welterweight, I disagree with that. Because, to be the #1 welterweight, you got to beat some of the #1 guys, and you got to have the solid resume for that. And for me, I feel like Terence Crawford, he definitely shows great skill, and he has a great gift, and some of the better skills over a lot of fighters, But to stake claim in one specific division, he hasn't done that, not since 140, not since he, destroyed 140, became undisputed. He really needs some more credible names at welterweight to be the #1 guy. If he's satisfied being the WBO champion, I'm cool. I'm cool with that. Then if he wants to retire as that champion and keep defending his belt, that's cool. But until then, the #1 welterweight. Should I reveal my #1 round, or should I do it in my podcast episode? I'm going to do a podcast episode talking about who I feel like the #1 welterweight is. Well, we already know. I feel like the #1 guy right now is Errol Spence. He is the unified champion. He's fought the more credible of opponents. And, of course, my #2 would be Manny Pacquiao. And then we know who my #3 is, right? But I'll break all that down for you in the podcast episode for sure. But I disagree with Amir Khan saying Terence Crawford is #1 welterweight because for those reasons, he hasn't fought enough credible opponents. Now, until Top Rank and PBC can come to terms, I don't know whose fault it is. I'm not going to go into all those politics, but until they come to terms to have him fight some guys like Danny Garcia or Sean Porter, I'm going to say Errol Spence is the #1 guy. I'm going to say Errol Spence is that #1 guy until they get some common names on their resume, and then we can start kind of breaking it down, kind of like when Manny was fighting some of the same guys Floyd did. Whenever Manny was destroying guys like Ricky Hatton and Oscar De La Hoya, guys that Floyd he already shared the ring with, then we started saying, okay, these are the two guys, Floyd's #1, Manny's #2, or vice versa, however people looked at the time. So Terence Crawford, he kind of needs to go into that category, start destroying guys like Danny Garcia, Sean Porter, Keith Thurman, even Jose Zito Lopez to get us somewhere in that PBC realm where you cross over, So, yeah, that's why I just feel like Terence Crawford isn't the #1 guy. And to me, it's kind of similar like this too. Like it's not the same exact situation, but I said this before. It's like when Roy Jones moved up to beat John Ruiz for the WBA heavyweight title. I know it was a one-shot deal, but at the moment when Roy won that belt, it made him the #1 pound-for-pound fighter because he had dominated so many different weight classes. He was undisputed light heavyweight. He won middleweight, super middleweight, and he was able to move up, and his skills were undeniable, throughout so many weight classes. You could match him up against so many different fighters, right? So he was definitely a heavyweight champion, but it didn't make him the #1 heavyweight because at the time, Lennox Lewis had the most belts at heavyweight, and he had beaten the more credible opponents. So if Roy had stayed around at heavyweight a little bit longer and beat like a Chris Bird, maybe taking on a Klitschko at the time, and then worked his way up and beat some common opponents that Lennox Lewis beat, then it would have been neck and neck. Then they would have fought for the #1 spot, if that makes sense. So it's kind of similar to that situation. Like Terence Crawford's been at welterweight longer than Roy spent at heavyweight, but he still hasn't beat any credible opponents to put him in that realm with not Lennox Lewis, but with Errol Spence, if that makes sense. That's what's kind of holding him back from being #1 to me. you know, in my opinion, which I'll break down the podcast episode again for y'all. But this was just a quick video. I wanted to kind of give you my thoughts on what Amir Khan said and why I disagreed with him, because it came just in time while I was working on this podcast episode too. So yeah, that's how I feel about it. I feel like Errol Spence still is the #1 welterweight. Now, when it comes down to that fight between Spence and Crawford, I can't really give anybody an edge right now. I think it's 50-50, because for the one reason that Crawford hasn't beat any top guys like Sean Porter to put him in that realm with Spence. But then again, you know, Spence doesn't have that same type of box, you know, like, of course, nobody has the same type of style as Terence Crawford, but like, he doesn't really have the same polished skills that Terence Crawford has. But he might not need it to beat somebody like Terence Crawford too, you know, as long as he has that full-fledged strength and his solid jab and his solid, you know, body punching, he could probably beat Terence Crawford. So it's up in the air, man. It's still 50-50. But once Terence Crawford beats a couple more credible guys at welterweight, then we can really talk about that #1 spot. You know, even when he catches up with Manny, because right now between 1 and 2, it's Manny and Errol for me. But yeah, let me know what y'all think in the comment section, guys. But that's what I think as far as who I feel like the #1 welterweight is and who I give the edge in the fight. Spence and Crawford still 50-50 right now. But yeah, look out for that podcast episode I'm going to do, #CB99 Talks. I'll kind of go in on the whole welterweight division. But let me know what y'all think in the comment section. Do you agree with Amir Khan or not? Make sure y'all subscribe here, Combo Breaker 99. Also subscribe to the Jab Effect too. I'm out, y'all. Peace.